Good evening. We're resuming the January 14th, 2015 Board of Selectmen's meeting. This meeting began at 7 p.m. where we opened the meeting, and then we went directly into an executive session wherein we discussed the litigation with BW Construction. We are now resuming the executive session, and we'll go on with the agenda. However, the first item on the agenda would be with regard to the library construction project. Mr. Smith?
Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Selectmen do approve final change order number 12 for the library project and to authorize the chair to sign on the town's behalf.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve change order number 12 for the library construction project, which is the final change order, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sign. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'm just going to take you up and sign it. That's great. I'm just going to take 1 minute to do as authorized and sign these documents. Anybody wants to tell some stories?
Yes.
One more page. Okay. So I apologize for that delay. The next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding sewer extension project options. And the Board of Selectmen wanted to do this in a public forum with notice to give individuals who would be affected by this Area C sewer project to come in and once again state, listen to what the project is and express either their concerns, their opposition to the project, or whether or not they were for it. So this is a Board of Selectmen's meeting and Sewer Study Committee meeting as well. So I just want to make sure that everybody, the Board of Selectmen, Karen Bure, Jim Neville, Chris Smith, myself, Andrea Wagner, Charles Aspinwall, the Town Administrator, and then for the Sewer Study Committee, we have Ed Chisholm, Barbara Thissell, and James McKay. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Aspinwall, who's going to talk about some of the proposals. We'll hear from anybody on the board, and then certainly we'll open it up to any comments or questions. The sewer project that we're dealing with is the Area C project, which is defined in 4 different parts. There's the base part, which is Village Street, from Apple Rock Street to Acorn Street. It includes Dyer Street and Blueberry Lane as offshoots of that Village Street. There's also the west portion, which is from Village Street to Acorn Street, which is Village Street, I'm sorry, Acorn Street to Tara Terrace. And in prior meetings, we discussed a south area as well. And that south area is defined as Pleasant Street from Village Street to Baltimore Street, and including Baltimore Street. There was also the north section for Area C, which is Pleasant Street from Village Street to Spencer Street. And I believe we did have handouts of the maps, okay? That defines the base area. Doesn't show the west area. Oh, it does on the back, okay. The north area and the south area. This project originated because the Board of Selectmen had received petitions signed by a number of residents, about 30 residents in this area. That matter was then referred to the Sewer Study Committee, and the Sewer Study Committee recommended proceeding with the project. The Board of Selectmen held a public hearing here in the auditorium on March 24th of 2014, where all of the four projects and the different combinations of the projects were proposed. And we heard from people for and against the project in some areas, against in others. And in the Maytown meeting, the Board of Selectmen decided to pursue the funding at the Maytown meeting. On May 2nd of 2014, at the annual town meeting, $120,000 was approved to design the project. The estimated betterment costs were $21,808, which would have serviced 146 units, which may have been one parcel or more than one parcel counted as one, or perhaps counted as more than one. But that project that was proposed was only for the base area and the west area. It did not include the south, and it did not include the north. Then construction funds, after we did the design, the construction funds were requested in the amount of $3.6 million, $3,660,000 at the fall town meeting. The betterment unit cost at that point was estimated to be about $18,523, which would service 162 units, also for the base and just the west. Now, at the fall annual town meeting, the discussion was tabled. It wasn't necessarily, I would say it wasn't necessarily defeated, but it certainly wasn't approved. So having it been tabled, what we as a board thought was that we wanted to make sure that all of the people that had originally come in here, well, certainly the people who had petitioned it originally, the people who had come here for the March 24th meeting here, and the people that showed up and voted and spoke out at the fall annual town meeting in November had an opportunity to come here and discuss with us how to proceed, since it was in fact tabled. At this point, I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Aspinwall. But the other thing we wanted to make sure is we wanted to have people here so that we could explain the options, because at the fall town meeting, a number of concerns and a number of questions came up that we could certainly answer, and we wanted to do it in this setting. So, Mr. Aspinwall?
Madam Chair, one of the issues that was discussed at the recent town meeting was betterment assessments and how the project would be financed. Under the the request that was made, that was tabled, there were, in the base area, 72 betterment assessments that would be assessed, and in the west area, 90 betterment assessments. So there were a total of 162 betterment assessments that would have been levied. Of that amount, 67 were for single-family homes, 13 were for duplex or two-family homes, 4 were for triple-deckers or three-family homes. There was one four-family home. There was one property that had 6 units on it. And there were 2 large parcels. One had 22 units on it and one had 25. And those were based on, in the case of the 25 units, there were 25 apartments at the Sikh community, and 22 units were proposed on Mr. Braun's property based on our engineer's analysis of what a subdivision could, or how the land could be subdivided. And I think the number of assessments here on more than one family homes has played a role in the concerns that have been expressed. In previous projects, almost 95% of the properties were assessed were single-family homes, and so that the financial implications to most of those property owners, again, were a single betterment. This is in the Area E, it was about $18,000. In previous projects, we have levied assessments in on multiple parcels. In Area E, we I think levied an assessment of 12 units on one of the farms there. And then when we did Spring Street, Mr. Whalen's apartment building was assessed a number of units. I think it was 16, if I recall correctly. So we have done that in the past, but again, the impact has been limited. In this case, in this project, as I mentioned, there are a fair number of units that have multiple betterments. One thing we have to do if we ever did assess multiple betterments was be able to support the appraisal values. If we're assessing a $15,000 or $18,000 betterment on 22 units, we have to make sure that indeed that the appraised value of that property would increase by that amount. And if it did not, if it was not supported by an appraisal, we would have to lower that assessment and then adjust the unit price otherwise. Since the town meeting, since the fall town meeting, we've looked at other options. We looked at servicing just the base area, which is from Acorn Street to Pine House Road on Village Street. Servicing it both by gravity and or by a low-pressure sewer. If we serviced it by gravity, we would still need a pump station that was proposed to be located at the intersection of Pleasant and Village. And the estimate that we have right now is that we would assess 85 units, and the betterment assessment would be $26,817. If we designed a low-pressure sewer for the entire area, the entire base area, which we would put piping in the ground, but we would not provide the pump and the generator that is necessary if power went out. The cost estimate for that betterment assessment would be $15,640, and then in addition to that, the homeowner would have to pay to have a pump installed on their property. Our engineer estimates that a pump and a generator for that would be about $7,500. So the comparison, the gravity would cost $26,817, and the total cost of the pump would be $23,140, but we would only assess a betterment of $15,640. Just to let residents know also that there are cases where betterment assessments can be suspended or deferred. Vacant parcels, that's parcels that are not built upon, may have their assessments suspended until development occurs or for a fixed time if they want to just do it for a fixed time. However, there's interest that accrues on that balance and it must be paid. The principal, however, would not have to be paid. Owners age 65 or older may defer assessments if they meet certain income guidelines. The base guideline is $20,000 of income, but town meeting can adopt a higher amount up to around the mid-50s right now, and you can defer the entire amount, the principal and the interest. We would have to enter into, the town would have to enter into an agreement with the property owner to do that. And we've also learned that if you have land classified under Chapter 61, Chapter 61A, or Chapter 61B, that the betterment assessment on that property is limited, that the betterment assessment could only be assessed on a pro-rata basis to the extent that the sewer facility we're installing that is financed by the assessment is used for improving the agricultural or horticultural use of the land. So I don't think there would be much of a case that that installing sewer would help the horticultural use or agricultural use of the land. So typically what we would be looking at is, would the sewer service the house that's on the property, and would the sewer service perhaps a barn or outbuilding? So we'd have to look at that as well. The assessments that we've estimated can vary widely. As the chair stated, the betterment assessment on the Basin West section, if we assess betterments by the uniform unit method, so it's on page 2, would be $18,522. But again, there are parcels that have multiple betterment units, and they would be assessed, in some cases, if you have a duplex, two $18,000 betterment assessments. If you have 3, it would be 3 assessments, and so on. So for those properties and for those that have the 22 and 25 units, there is a large financial impact. So we decided to take a look at, there's another method you could use called the frontage method. Would that make much difference? The cost that's assessed is roughly $3,722,000. And if you divide that in the Basin West section by the frontage of 15,505 feet, you get a per foot cost of $193.53. Now, in that zone, in the Village Street area, it requires 125 feet of frontage. So if you multiply the $193, if your lot has 125 feet of frontage, and you multiply that 125 times the $193 per foot cost, you'd get a betterment assessment of $24,191. There are 2 parcels that have 50 feet of frontage. Their betterment assessment would be $96.76. And there's also a parcel that has 852 feet of frontage. So they would be assessed 106 by the straight calculation. And if it were supported by an appraisal, they'd be assessed $164,889. So it seems that neither the unit method nor the frontage method addresses the issue of how to of the financial impact on those parcels that have more than 1 unit. We did discuss with the Department of Revenue, and they are researching this right now, whether or not we could use a different method. We're calling it the approval not required method, that the planning board can subdivide land through a process called approval not required. If you have the right frontage and the right depth and the right area, I believe, you can go to the planning board and get your land subdivided without having to go through the full subdivision review process. If that method were used on those parcels of vacant land, to just use the frontage, for instance, Mr. Braun's land would change from 22 units to 2 units because the frontage on his property is limited. That would obviously help that property owner, but for the Seek property, it wouldn't, because it's not, I think it was about, the Seek property had at least 300 and some odd feet of frontage. So that frontage calculation still would yield a large betterment for the Seek property. The A&R method is something DOR is looking at right now to see. It was an idea we proposed to them, and they are looking at it to see if it's something that we could use legally. There is another issue that was pointed out to us, again, I've already mentioned, was the issue of the Chapter 61A property. And if, in our original calculations, we calculated assessments on property that was qualified under Chapter 61A, we would have to take that out of the calculation. And if we take that out of the calculation for the Basin West areas, the betterment assessment increases from $18,522 to $24,799. I'm sorry, that's the wrong number. From $18,522, and this is not on your spreadsheet. It's $21,131. If we defer that the Chapter 61A property that we're aware of. So the range in betterment assessments for the Basin West areas range from roughly $18,000 or $19,000 to $25,000, which still has a large impact on those properties that have multiple betterments. So we looked at, all right, let's look at doing the base area only. And once you take the west area out of the calculation, the number of units served goes down to 85 units. And using the unit method, the betterment would be $26,817. And we're not aware that there's any Chapter 61 property in the base area. So we would not be encumbered by that. The frontage method is not too much different in that area. If we just do the base area only, there's 10,396 feet of frontage. So the betterment assessment would be $27,408. Similarly, if we sewer the base area with low pressure sewer, where you use grinder pumps, where the town puts just the small pipe in the road and leaves the stub, and then you put the pump on your own property and pay for that yourself. The betterment assessment is $15,640, but added to that the cost of the pump and the generator, it's at $7,500. It's $23,140. But again, only $15,640 would be assessed as a betterment. That's on the unit basis, and then on the frontage basis, again, it's not too different. It's a total of $23,485. If you have 125 feet of frontage, everyone's going to be different. The predominant frontage in the area, not hitting the average, but the predominant number was 125 feet. But again, there are some that have 50 feet, some that have 852 feet. I remember a 500-foot frontage, a 300-foot. So those properties, again, would be impacted under the frontage method. Going back to the first page, the issue of betterments seems to be the big issue as to how to go forward with this, or whether to go forward, and the impact it does have on property owners. There were, as the chairman said, this project resulted from a petition that property owners sent to the Board of Selectmen and requested. Other neighborhoods, not recently, but when we conducted our study back in, I think it was 2003, as to where we should extend sewer, there were two other neighborhoods that did request sewer. One is the Dover Road area, which included Dover Road, Old Dover Road, J. William Heights, Crestview, Clifford Circle, Small Parter Island Road, Bridge Street, Ironwood Lane, King Phillip Drive, and Eden Street. And then there's Area B3, which included Village Street from Main Street to Forest, Birch Street, portion of Forest Road, and again, that was Village Street down to Main Street. So those neighborhoods also previously requested sewer, but based on the priority ranking by the Sewer Study Committee, the Village Street area was the next under consideration. We don't know if there's any recent interest by those neighborhoods, but there may be. The other thing I want to bring up that's important to consider is the impact of Chapter 40B projects. 40B projects are projects where developers can vary town standards and install more dense housing or denser housing if they reserve 25% of the homes for lower moderate income housing. In that case, they can come into the town, the developer, and say, we want a sewer project, and we're going to pay for it, but they can get from the ZBA, or from, if the ZBA denied it, from the State Housing Appeals Committee, they could get a sewer connection, and we would not have any say in saying no to them. So it's one thing to keep in mind that we do have capacity. We have, that's on page 5. Right now we have about, on paper, we have 53,000 gallons of capacity. But in reality, we have more because these are all based on 110 gallons per bedroom, and typically a Millis resident uses much less. We've used the number 80 in the past. That's in reality, but we have to do all of this by the state calculation of 110 gallons per bedroom. We have reserved a certain amount of capacity for commercial development in the downtown and for eventual development of the former GAF property. So that has been reserved. But again, if someone came in with a 40B project, they could scoop up those gallons. So the board discussed all this and decided to hold this public forum to hear how and whether residents wanted to proceed and whether they would recommend going forward or not with the project. Madam Chair?
Thank you. And so as we each mentioned, one of the, in addition to the Sewer Study Committee looking at this area and prioritizing this area, we did receive that petition. It was signed by 30 people. I can't tell you whether they were all base people or west. I think they were kind of all over that entire area. But the prioritization, and I don't know if anybody on the Sewer Study Committee wants to speak to that, but it's based on things like failures of systems in that area, and other requests, like as Mr. Aspinwall mentioned, people in the past having requested Dover Road, which would be in that Dover Road area, which would be within the capacity, and the other side of Village Street. So I don't know if anybody on the committee wants to speak. I'm not. I think maybe more for questions than speaking, but so we'll, unless anybody else has any. No, you go ahead. I wasn't. Is that, I don't know.
Try this one. Over the past 4 years, we did look at all the different sites that were previously mentioned. And our main goal was to secure enough gallons for the downtown area. And once we did that, we had purchased more capacity from the town of Franklin. So we got an abundance more gallons left for us. So that's where we started to start looking at to different areas, the area B, C, and whatever that was still left. And in that time, that's when we did receive the petition that was from this area that were in question. The health department did report that there is a high rate of failures, and that there were many people changing as they sell their house. They were going from different septic systems. So that's why we came to this conclusion that this was a viable option, the sewer was there, and that the people wanted it. So that's how we came to agree that, to go along with the residents, that they did want it, and that's all.
And because this was tabled at the fall annual town meeting, the decision with how or whether to proceed is something that we have to make, but we want input, as we've asked for input back when we had the public meeting in March of 2014. We could proceed just the base area, we could, again, see if we can address some of the concerns and see if the consensus is to proceed with the same project again, or to do something different, whether it's basin north or basin south or something else, or not that area at all. So that's why we're doing this. So if anybody has any questions or would like to make any comments, the only thing I'm going to ask is that you do, in fact, come up to one of these microphones and that you state your name and where you live, please.
I'm Michelle Butler, 321 Village Street. I guess my concern is sometimes at the beginning, we prefaced it with the petition and not knowing the information about those 30. My concern is, if my spouse and I both signed it, and everybody had their spouse sign it, then really you might be down to 15 people. And if those people were spread across all 4 areas, then you're really looking at tops maybe a couple people within the same area that may even want this. At the meeting in the fall, there wasn't one person out of the hundreds of people here that actually spoke for it, and I would think that was the time for them to make sure that they were able to speak towards it. So I'm concerned about really what is the desire for this. Being on Village Street in the base group, I know that every house around me just about has had their septic replaced. So that's, 5 of us that have already had it replaced. And the base area, if we went just with that, is the smallest area. So 72 units is going to be in a number of duplexes within that. So I'm not sure if you can speak to really who's pushing this and what is the benefit to, the homeowners and the benefit to Millis to actually doing this, because with everything else that is really needed to be spent with the Clyde Brown project and all these other projects, I'm not sure why there would be an appetite to spend this money right now if there was only a handful of people that were really pushing for it.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Thanks. I can appreciate that. Unfortunately, what was presented to us was a list of names. It wasn't really an official type thing. It was just a list of people that signed, and they came and spoke to us. But in the first town meeting, the appropriation of the $120,000, which was the design phase of that, I believe it passed 100 to 4 or something close to that, Mr. Aspinall? 85 to 4. So at that time, which was that first vote on it, there was support for it. So, and it's appropriate to have the discussions. It's appropriate to have the discussions in November on whether there still was support for that. I think the issues, particularly with this area of town, is that there's such large tracts, that impact up there, that impact specific people. There's large properties where there's a lot of assessments and where we haven't seen that in the past in other areas of town. So, I think what we want to do, not speaking for the board, is really figure out, is this the right place to concentrate on, or should we move on to other areas of town? Now, we're going to react to people saying, I want the sewer, and that's what we did. But if the climate's changed, then we need to know that so that we can move on to other areas of town where they want the sewer.
There, in talking with some other people in the area, the thought was that you could choose to hook up if you wanted to and pay then. And so that's where we didn't think it was a big deal. Okay, if you want to put in sewer, I'm going to opt out, not knowing that we had no choice to opt out. So I think the early on support may have been misleading, and I know we're not the only ones that that may have thought that. So just
Okay,
wanted to-
and that very well may be true. So just to answer one of your points regarding, well, you don't really know where the people were and they were, I just said that because I didn't have it in front of me. I do know where they are. They're predominantly between Acorn and Pleasant Street. Those are the people that signed the petition. And I
Are they
wouldn't
all
argue.
homeowners? Are they actually the homeowners?
Hold on for a second. And I wouldn't argue with you that perhaps there are people signing a piece of paper that say, yes, town, give me sewer, but don't realize that that means that they pay a betterment.
Yeah.
I would
Exactly.
agree with you there 100%. So I don't know. I'm not going to assess it. I'm not going to check them off. What we want to know going forward is it wanted? Is it wanted in that area or not? So, we're not saying, hey, you should vote on it because we have 30 signatures here. We're not saying that at all. We're just
Yeah, I
saying,
just want to make sure that,
let's figure out if that's the project that we should do.
great, thanks.
She asked my question, basically. I was wondering what had changed since the last town meeting. There was no push for it last time. What's motivated you to bring it up again? 30 people out of whatever, 4,000, but I have one other question if you want to
Okay,
respond.
let me clarify that, okay? I'm going to clarify that at the fall annual town meeting, what happened was this issue was tabled. And at the prior town meeting, as Mr. Smith had said, when we did the design portion of it, there were a lot of people at that town meeting that I recognized from being at the March meeting. At the March meeting that we had a lot of support for it. And then at the May annual town meeting, when we did the design money, it was an overwhelming response to it. So because our fall annual town meeting, a lot of people who spoke up, we hadn't seen before. Well, we had, but not in the town meeting environment. And so they were coming here and they were saying their reasons why they did not want it. And the meeting was well attended. There were a lot of people here. And I wasn't sure if the people who thought they voted for it in May and were in support of it didn't realize that we had to keep doing this.
Mhm.
And we just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's all.
I understand. That's good. Sometimes when I don't understand an issue, I just kind of take the word of the selectmen or the finance committee. If they think we need a $100,000 sewer study, I assume they know what they're talking about, but maybe sometimes that's not a good thing. Well, okay, so you explained the fall town meeting. My other question, when I was on the Board of Health, I went to workshops and conferences about sewer, and they said that the wave of the future just may be individual septic systems, because this massive collection of waste and sending it to a treatment plant, it's a long story, but there was a prediction that in the future there would be more individual septic systems, and it might be a better, more environmental way to go. So I wonder if anybody's looked into that. I don't have the background material on it, but is a larger septic system really something, a larger sewer system, something we want?
Mr. Aspinall?
Madam Chair, that is the way some communities are headed. In communities that have good soils, the areas that we have installed sewer typically are areas that have not had good soil that would make good absorption systems. We did actually conduct a study of doing our own neighborhood wastewater treatment plant. One location was going to be the Dyer Street Triangle, but again, the cost of doing that and the soils in the area made the project infeasible.
Jack Kovac, 349 Village. I appreciate you holding this meeting so we can better understand the situation. I think we're in a process now of hopefully slowing down and reframing what it is that we're dealing with here. I agree with my neighbor. When you put a bill in somebody's hand, it changes a lot, and that's why you saw in the fall meeting a big response. The spring meeting was 89 to 10 or so in favor of the project, which is not a very good representation, especially since most of those people probably were not impacted by this in the first place. Then the bills came, and we were more aware of how our mortgages and whatnot will increase. Since I came here to Millis in 2009, my taxes and everything has boosted my mortgage already by $135 a month. This, at say $20,000 over the course of 20 years, you divide it down to a monthly cost about $83 a month more. So I think we need to distill this down as to, while it's a good idea for bettering the town and moving the town forward, is how much can the residents bear, and is this something that you all should focus on first as opposed to later? So you mentioned somebody comes to you with a petition with 30 signatures, of which many of them may be renters, some of them may be homeowners. I think I may have even signed it because someone came up to my door and told me the story, and I said, sure, betterment, that sounds better. So that's what I based all my information off of. Now that I have an understanding of how much it impacts me and the timing of it, I don't think it's right. It would be good for environmental impact, but when the town meeting happened in the fall, I think the general consensus was, wow, this is a big impact on a small number of people. And many, I mean, it was overwhelming. It might have been like 500 to 5 against possibly the concept, which I think is what we need to do right now. Is I know that if someone comes to you and says, we want something, you as selectmen may say, sure, you want it? It's better for the town. You will help pay for 80% of it? Yeah, let's do it. Now might be the time. But also your job as selectmen is to listen to that fall response, which was a lot of people, when they heard about people who had multiple units and the cost involved, was just outrageous.
Okay. If I can, let me just address that, please, because, again, I don't want to go back to the petition. I don't want to go back to March 24th and the support we had here. I don't want to go back to the Maytown, and I don't want to keep going over all of that stuff. I understand that people could have signed this and not realize that it is a cost to them. But again, the reason why we go and we look when asked to put sewer in a certain place is things like how many failures are there, how many people are going to have to get a new septic system within a short period of time. We have information on things like that. The soils in the area, so we pursue it. I'm not saying we're not listening to the November meeting. I just want to make sure that everybody who is interested understands, or at least discloses to us what they'd like to do. And I'd also like to answer some of the questions which I think Mr. Aspinwall did with respect to some of those very significant concerns about people with big properties. Mr. Braun, who has that, and there are ways to defer that. There are ways to do different things that Mr. Aspinwall went over, and we can certainly go over again. So I don't know if that would change for everybody else, the idea that they could defer it, they could do a deed restriction, different options to go forward with this. It's not necessarily better for the town. What it is it betters an individual's property, or it increases the value, arguably, when you have a sewer connection rather than when you have a septic, because the idea is that eventually the septic may fail and you're going to have to replace it. That's one of the issues. So then you're going to have that cost at that point. So if we can just focus on, right, if we can just, I mean, it is about the future. It's not about right now, yeah, it's going to sink for a while the road gets dug up and they're putting pipes in there, but eventually it is going to be a better system for everybody. And as each system looks upon failing and people want to tie into that, now they have the option to do that rather than replace their whole septic system. So
Sure.
I guess understanding that there are betterment costs anywhere from $18,000 to $25,000. If the original project, which is the base and the west, were the same, we're estimating it to be 18, but if a certain property defers their 22, we know it's going to go up. Is that something that the people who are in favor of it would still like to pursue, or is this just a dead issue and we shouldn't pursue it at all?
Right.
That's what I'm trying to get a handle on.
Now, the select few that need septic or sewer help, if they were to individually just build their own brand new septic system, that would be the equivalent of the 18 to 26,000 anyway. So here you have a situation of very few people that gets voted on by the entire town, most of which are not impacted by it financially, saying yes, and then having a huge financial impact on everybody else. So this is something that is kind of caught wildfire. And bettering the street would be good. And I think now what we need to do is just think about whether it's something we should do now or maybe put off and focus on other aspects of the town.
And so our issue with that is that in terms of putting it off, it doesn't mean that we're not going to put sewer elsewhere. We may just, the sewer study committee may on their own say, well, look, now we're getting a lot of more failures up in the X area, and let's look at putting sewer there. You could, as Mr. Aspinwall said, have a 40B project come in, and now our sewer capacity is now much more restricted. So if we were to then look at the Village Street area again at another time, we wouldn't be able to necessarily do it. Okay, we wouldn't have that capacity there. So that's another reason why we want to make sure that this decision is made knowing all of the facts.
Sure, I'll take a seat, but I may have some more questions, but on the financial side, things can only go up from here because there's the betterment, there's the tie-in cost. Now, if you're tying in, is that the same cost for someone who's 50 feet away from the tie-in or someone who's 300 feet back? How much would that cost, the differential? Then the cost of actually sewage on a quarterly basis. So for my cost right now with septic is $300 every 3 years. My water bill is $100 every quarter. So if my sewage was water bill, that'd be $400 a year. So you have betterment, everything just goes up and up and up because, again, it gets started from just a few, of which I signed the petition to start with. But thanks for hearing me out. I might have another question later.
Okay. Unless you want to.
Madam, I just wanted to ask, because around the cost of a septic system, I believe it's well north of that. Is there anybody in the room that has recently installed a septic system up in that area? Is there any way you could just, I don't want to pry, but just an approximate cost of?
By the time we were done, it was $26,000.
Okay.
We're a duplex, but I didn't have to do a mounding system. I know some people have to do a mounding system. Right by me, the next door neighbor just did his. Across the street's working on it right now. The neighbor next to that just did theirs. So pretty much we're all done in the area. There's a couple houses that haven't been done, but it was around $26,000. That doesn't include having my field bleached because it was done in 1971 and it was cardboard, so it was junk.
Right.
But they brought in all new septic sand, did it flat, did a nice job. It's going to last a long time. So.
Did they say approximately how long they lasted? Of course, regulation can change too, but I was under the impression 30 years is probably a good number.
Yeah, well, this one, what happens is when you put septic sewage in, Title V now titles you have to now, when you sell the house now, have to hook up. So Title V is the reason we were thinking about refinancing or time we were living, my sister-in-law owned the house with us, so we bought the whole house out. We did a Title V, it failed, so we decided just to change the septic. So now, if that comes in and we decide to sell, then I'd have to hook up anyway, so it's more cost. Right now, I put out $26,000. You're telling me I may have to pay another $40,000 to $50,000 because I have a duplex. So now I'm close to $75,000. So, and then if we, like I said, my septic, I think I pump it once a year, it's $210. So my costs are much lower. So it works out better for me without septic, without sewage.
Thank you for sharing.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Bernie D'Onofrio, 299 Village Street. And I have a question about betterment assessments. And you mentioned a couple of previous projects, sewer projects, that there were betterment assessments. Can you give us an idea of what an individual homeowner had to pay as an assessment for those other projects compared to what being asked for this one?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Aspinwall.
The assessment for the Area E, which was Middlesex, I'm sorry, not Middlesex, it was, a portion of Middlesex Street, Orchard Street, and Ridge Street, was about $18,500 per unit.
And for your information, I'm against the project. My house is 500 feet, 500 to 600 feet away from the street, so it would be a prohibitive cost for me to hook up. And I kind of like having my own private septic for personal reasons, and whether I want to be off the grid or on the grid or who else it's going to help. That's my own personal belief, and I'll replace my septic system when it fails. So, thank you.
Brenda D'Onofrio, same address, 299 Village Street. My question is there a way that you can poll the people involved and see who would hook up?
Oh, I'd be interested to know of the people who are here, is anybody in support of it? Because if not, we don't have to, okay,
We can move on.
we don't have to talk about it.
We have expended quite a bit of money to date.
And that's the other thing, I mean, and I'm only talking over him because he can't, we've been instructed to only use the microphone. So, what Mr. Neville wanted to point out is that the other reason that we did this was not only to hear from you who is in support of it, but money has been expended. We have done designs. We have gone up through this process until November, and just want to make sure that people do in fact understand that. And if
I think it's a little irresponsible to be spending that money without actually speaking to the people that live in that area.
excuse me. So, as I mentioned, we had
Is anybody here in favor?
I just asked that, and I'm gonna hear from those people shortly.
None of us were asked. I never saw a petition.
Okay.
I'm still not seeing a petition. You're talking about failed systems, but you're not telling us the number. All of my neighbors have just replaced theirs. We are not aware of anybody with a failed system. I do feel for those people if you have, but you already know replacing your system is going to cost the same as doing what they're proposing. But you're costing the rest of us all this money that we don't have.
Okay. So I'll just
So to
address
say
that.
that you paid for this study and that this money has been spent out doesn't change our feeling about this. You're asking for our opinion, and we're all saying we're not interested. If there's one or two, does their opinion matter more than ours? Do they weigh more than we do?
Can you just let me address your concern here? We had a public meeting in March of 2014.
Yes, and we got the letter before that, and the letter was very misleading. It said those people who were bettered by this. We didn't understand. We're not stupid people. It was written in a way that wasn't clear to us. Once we got on board and understood it, we have been trying to make ourselves heard. You keep going back to that meeting, but when we bring up things like the petition or how many failed, you dismiss us. You're aggravated with the questions we have, and then you go back to things that we've already explained ourselves.
Actually, no, I'm trying to answer your question. So I am going back to that meeting. We had that public meeting, and then in May of 2014, there was an annual town meeting where the money for the design that I spoke of that's already been voted on and paid out was voted on in that town meeting. We didn't write a check to do something about design just to do it, okay? It was a town meeting article that was favorably voted to expend that money. Then in November, it was quite clear that people were not for this project. So that's why we're bringing you here together today. We're not trying to talk you into anything. If the people in that area don't want the sewer, we're not going to pursue the project.
Okay,
Okay?
we don't want it.
Thank you. Mr. Braun?
Yeah, Neil Braun, 371 Village Street. I've heard talk of interest on this bill, but I've never heard who's paying the interest. Is that coming out of our pocket or what? I don't know. If we're paying $900 a year, there's interest on that whole thing as far as I could make out. And I don't hear of anybody saying that we have to pay so much interest.
That interest is figured into the 18,000, am I right? Oh, it's not. It's in addition to it. And then I think what we did was, didn't we break, I don't know if we have it here today, but I think we broke it down by what?
I didn't know if the interest was coming after everything's straightened out, then we get the interest thrown on, plus the $900. See, that interest doesn't come up.
Madam Chair, the way it's divided up, if you pay the bill, when the project is complete, the town would send you a bill. Let's say it's for $18,500. If you pay that all at once, there's no interest. If you elect to pay that over 10 years, we would send you a bill for $1,850 whatever the math is, plus interest on the unpaid balance. And every year as you pay it down, your interest would go down as the balance is paid down. But there is interest on it, and the homeowner is responsible for paying that.
Okay, is that interest from the first year we are into it, or does that come on later?
It
That's
comes
what
up
I'm
every
not-
year.
Hmm?
Every year.
What's it for
Every
the
year
first-
for which you have an unpaid balance.
Okay, so say it's $900 a year for the principal. What, on the first year, what would my interest be plus the 900?
I would have to know the interest rate at which we are borrowing.
Well, it could be quite a bit. That's why I'm wondering what it is.
Right now we borrow at, under 1%
Under 1%.
interest. Okay, so if you're saying it's $1,000 a year, I know you're not, you're saying it's 900.
I'm not sure. That's just, I'm not sure what it was. 8,000, 9,000, I'm not sure. But that's the number I just got, and I just had a question on the interest, and I didn't want to get hit with a big interest bill.
No, it would be figured into whatever that is. But what we discussed earlier on too is that there is a way to defer. And again, we don't have to talk about this if there's no interest in it. But there's a way to defer your betterment payment, but also to defer your the interest on it in a situation for you. So some people could defer the payment, but have to pay the interest.
Right. Okay.
But there's also a way to do both, I think, for the agricultural.
Right. Just as an example, if the betterment were $18,500 and we're borrowing at less than 1% right now, it's $120 per year for the interest. So you would pay the 1/10 or 1/20th if you pay over 20 years plus the interest.
Okay. I wasn't sure on that.
But if the interest rate went up, it would obviously the interest would go up.
All right. Well, I think that's a lot of money to pay for sewage, and I'm against it. But another thing is that when the sewage is coming through the whole town, we're losing all our empty space. Everything's going to be taken up by houses the way it's going. Because if you go by an open area, it's all going to be betterments. So what open area are we going to have when the town gets through? There isn't going to be much open area at all. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to hear from somebody in support of it at this point. And I know you're not, so I will hear from you, though. But
I calculated the figures for what the costs were with the interest rate that was posted at the last meeting, and it was, I think, $1,536 annually to do a 20-year finance of what the costs were. So the total payments and interest were $1,536 annually.
Hello, Kathy McGinnis, 78 Island Road. Could you please clarify for us, Madam Chair, what constitutes a failed test, Board of Health test? Is it the percolation rate, or is it the fact that someone has reviewed it and said absolutely nothing can be, no septic plan could ever be designed for that property?
Hi, my name is Barbara Tassell. I'm with the Board of Health. Several things come to mind when you ask that question. When you go to actually put an addition on your home or to sell your home, we need to do a Title V inspection, and there are specialists that go out there and do that. We look for hydraulic failure. That would be if there's any sewerage on the ground or if it's backing up in your house. We'd look for evidence that it's an unsafe situation, and that triggers a lot of repairs. But one thing I did want to say also from the conversation, and I'm not trying to talk people into sewer connections, but septic systems do only last about 30 years. So if you have a system that's 40 years old, you're doing great, but you're probably going to have to replace it pretty soon. They clog. Sewerage gets out of the septic tank and it clogs the stone, and they do need to be replaced. So they don't last forever. Everyone's going to have the conversation of replacing their septic system at some point, either through an addition in your home or selling the home or just failure on its own. So That's why we're having this conversation in the first place.
Madam Chair, as a follow-up to that, it seems like the tests have failed, but has any homeowner gone to any engineer, and the engineer has stated to the homeowner that his property will not support a newly designed septic system? I ask that because there's state-of-the-art tested septic systems out there now. Many of you are This Old House watchers. They had one up in the North Shore that was on ledge. And what they did is that the septic system was in the basement, and it went through different tanks. And at the end of the tank, you could drink the water. And the guy drank it right on TV. So I'm wondering if people are all of a sudden saying my septic system's failing and expecting, I am on sewer already, and my betterment will go up and my fees will go up as a result of this. And I would help someone if something's sinking right into the ground. But as it stands now, from what you see, especially on Cape Cod, where it's all sand down there, I've talked to an engineer who said you can design anything now. There's shared, there's getting variances that you can have closer to your house. So I just want to make sure that people know that when you hear someone saying, oh, my septic system failed, it's not the fact that there's no design available for that property. It's just that the initial test that the Board of Health does has failed.
I guess I would say the worst case that I have seen, people actually need to put a tight tank into their yards because we can clean water, we have the technology to clean it, but we still have to get rid of it. So even if it is of drinking water quality, we need to discharge it in your yard, and if it's clay or very bad material or high groundwater, we really don't have any good options then. Then we have walls around three sides of your septic system, and they can be very expensive. All those alternative technologies can be very, very expensive. $50,000 they can be.
Gary Scotland, 89 Spencer Street. My concern is that my system, I've been at this property for 35 years, and it's very wet. I'm sure Mr. McKay can tell you, but in the wintertime, the water that comes out when it rains and across Village Street, Pleasant Street, it's in my backyard right now. It's a skating rink, and I don't know if and when it's going to fail. And if it fails before sewer gets in, then I'm going to maybe hit with the double charge. I'm not going to have any choice. And so I think I'm for it because to me it permanently takes care of the situation. Not that I'm going to live through the life of the sewer system, but I just think that there are some people that are going to be put in a rock and a hard place between now and the 4 or 5 years that it takes to get this done. And the only other question I had is Acorn Street being targeted because of the new development? Well, not targeted, but was that on the rigid, I don't know when the...
Totally separate issue. So there's an Acorn Street development, Hickory Hill, I believe, right? So that's going in, and when they do that development, they are going to have sewer. And we ask that the developer there extend that to portions of Acorn Street and portions of Farm Street that also had high failure rates, and the neighbors that were going to be impacted were affected. So that's separate, paid for by the developer.
Okay, thank you.
You know.
And they're connecting off an existing sewer line.
Yeah, those people are still going to have to pay to connect their home to the sewer line, but the sewer line is already going to be in there.
So I have 3 quick questions. So can you help me understand how politics of this works in that a lot of people who are not impacted by this have a say in whether this goes forward or not, such as in the town meeting?
Yes, so when we put a sewer, well, first of all, the capacity is the town's capacity. Mr. Aspinwall went over the numbers. We have a certain capacity that is available to different areas, or not to different areas, to people of the town that we can put the sewer into. When we do that and we pay for that project, the betterment is 80% of the cost. The remaining 20% of the cost is borne by the people who are presently using the sewer system. So for every other resident in the town of Millis that has sewer service and pays on their water sewer bill a sewer charge, we'll see an increase in their rate because of that 20%. So that's why it's open to.
So that's why they get a vote on
Madam
it.
Chair, just to elaborate, whenever the town has to borrow money,
No, that's it.
the town meeting is the legislative body that we have in town that decides whether or not to borrow that money. So that's why it also requires a 2/3 majority vote by town meeting to do that. So, I mean, that's just a form of government that we have.
Okay, so that kind of ties into my second question, which is it an outrageous concept to, I mean, a betterment makes it better, whether you tie in or not, but if you were to have, instead of 80 families impacted by this, and in all of Millis carrying a nominal increase in their taxes, is that a direction that we cannot go?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
See, to answer that, I mean, it does, what you're saying does make sense, but it doesn't, the sewer system doesn't work that way. Same thing with our water system. They're enterprises of the town, so they're separate budgets within the town, and they're supported by user fees. Okay, so however many gallons of water you use goes to pay for the water system. Okay, the same thing with the sewer system. You know, your usage determines how much you pay through that fee, and only people that use the system pay into that. Okay, so that's why it's, I understand where you're going. You know, the entire town votes on it, but only a certain number of people use it. You know, unfortunately, there is nothing we can do to change that.
Okay, so then that kind of, my final question wraps it up is, you've heard from a couple of people, you've heard a couple of very strong opinions. You heard a very strong opinion at the fall meeting of the desire to table it, which could also be interpreted as, we're not so sure that we like this idea. Where do you, as a selectman, where do you think we're going? Where are we right now? Are you all in support of the lack of support, or are you still thinking that you want to go forward with this despite this new perspective?
So I'll tell you right now, without this project, right, we have 53,000 gallons of sewer capacity available. Am I reading that correctly? And I don't see a lot of support for this project, so I wouldn't put it out there again. I just wouldn't.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, exactly what town meeting asked us to do, or, you know, instructed really the Finance Committee to table this, is why we're having this meeting here, is to determine where we're going to go. Are we going to stay in this area? If there's overwhelming support to stay in this area, we would, because we understand that there is a need, but I understand what people are saying. But if it's time to move on to another section, then we'll give a crack at another area of town that wants to use that capacity. But once the capacity is gone, it's gone. We've already we bought this capacity through the Charles River District, and there's only so much. So once it's gone, it really is gone. And then, which is okay. I'm not trying to scare people. I'm not trying to say anything. But, I mean, that's just the reality. And this area that we're talking about now was the first priority. Okay, so if we're being told, let's move on someplace else, we'll move on to someplace else for another area of town.
And I'm just going to add one, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, I'm just going to add one more thing. That it seems that whatever area you're living in on Village Street, which I think is part of the base, right, sir? Where these people have all, within a very short period of time, replaced their septic systems. Unfortunately, maybe those people, or some of them, were a big push to get this area done. But now they have undertaken, due to time or whatever, and done it themselves, and now those individuals don't want it. I'm not saying that nobody who supported the project did, But I completely understand that, and I think that will happen as time goes by.
Okay, so then what I ask is, if the answer is, as what I'm interpreting is, you might pursue other options in the town before this. If that means it's a no to go forward with it, could you make that known to the other people that are not here? Because there's only a couple dozen people here. Could you share the information that the board has decided to move on to other things?
Well,
in addition to that, if that's the answer is it's a no, if you find financial ways to reduce this cost to something reasonable, very reasonable, maybe it's something that, it's something just you can put out there again. I'm not saying kill it dead in the water, but at least for now.
Well, I'm going to say, this is not on the May town meeting warrant. And I don't see this board, based on this meeting, placing it on that warrant. So that's the communication. I mean, this is a televised meeting. This is an open meeting. There will be minutes to this meeting. I think we have received the message, and I don't think you'll see this article on the May town meeting warrant.
And Madam Chair, and I don't think, Mr. Aspinall, when was the Ridge Street, Orchard Street project done? Was it 10 years ago? 2008. So, the betterment at that point was roughly the same as we're talking about now. So, and I'm not making any judgment calls on this. $18,000 is an awful lot of money. All right, $1,000 a year is a lot of money. However, from that perspective, from history and what other areas have counted them, it doesn't seem like it's an unreasonable amount of money per parcel. But you understand that your area of town, there's a lot of parcels that are a lot bigger than what that area was, right? So people were getting hit a lot more, and that's something that we didn't factor in, at least initially in our conversations and our analysis. But I'd be very hesitant to take the position that we're going to table this for now, and then maybe 5-6 years later revisit this area, because we may not be able to. All right, and I just want to make sure everybody understands that. I'm not trying to, again, scare anybody, but it's just a reality.
There's nothing that prohibits anybody from making the request, okay? If you live in that area and you're looking for, you make the request, we'll take a look at it. But right now, it's off.
Due diligence now, because we did have a large turnout in the spring town meeting recommending moving forward with this, and with the expenditure of $120,000, we have to do our due diligence and have these meetings to confirm what the public wants. So we don't want to just spend the money without the residents' approval. However, we've already expended a lot of money in this area, so we want to ensure that the decision is proper to move forward or not move forward.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
My name is Bonnie Hilton. I live at 129 Village. I'm not directly affected by this, but I'm wondering if we can maybe short-circuit this as a problem in the future. Do we not have the capacity to contact the owners in the various areas, whether you're talking about Base West, South, North, or the other areas that are there, not by petition, not by asking people to come out to a meeting, but to say, these are what our options are. If we progress, if we go forward at this point, this is what it's likely going to cost you for betterment. This is what it may cost you. The cost is up to you for hookup. This is what the other factors that might affect you. This is what you should take into account. And I would suggest, not wanting to insult anyone, but that it not be written by town council, but rather by somebody who specializes in communication so that people can really understand it, and actually poll the people in those areas that are affected. We know that people who show up are the ones that are heard, but obviously different subsets of people are showing up at different meetings. And it seems to me that way we would have a better idea of who really wants this before we go ahead in any capacity.
Okay, and I know that you're not part of the area, so what happened was about a year ago, or I don't know, 11 months ago, we did send notice to each of the people that were affected in the north, the base, the west of that section, to come to that public meeting, which was very well attended, by the way, in March of 2014. We did that. Is there something else we could have done? Sure, maybe. But so.
But you're talking about the sense that I'm hearing.
Yeah. Right, and same way we invited to this meeting in particular. Now, you're here, but I know you didn't receive anything, but other people did.
Yes, but the same way that we're now talking about, it sounds like the sense is maybe we won't go forward in Village Street, and you're talking about the possibility of offering the opportunity to other sections of town so that we don't go through the same process again. Could we contact those sections of town to find that out? And you're right. We already have the potential for hooking up to the sewer where I live. And full disclosure, I'm not hooked up either, so.
Madam Chair, one point with asking for expression for a separate poll is you don't know whether that's valid either. It's whoever paid attention to the notice that came in the mail that day and bothered to fill out the poll. So, that would be an additional step that we would have to take above and beyond holding the public meetings that we take. And we wouldn't know whether the results that we receive are any more valid than what we hear tonight.
Okay, I used the word poll, but I wasn't thinking in terms of coming and voting, but rather sending a formal letter to the owner of the property. And they can opt to open their mail or not, they can opt to respond or not, but at least everyone would have had the opportunity then. And I'm hearing you say that they may have had the opportunity in this case, but obviously...
We do that.
Okay.
And these type of a situation, when we did it on Ridge Street, Orchard Street, here, we did do the same thing. We invite them, we have these meetings. This is the second one that we've done, but only because of the Fall Town meeting. But yes, we would do that. Sir?
Hi. I'm Paul Gasmini, 347 Village Street. Right now, interest rates are pretty good, and now's a good time to borrow money, so if this were to go forward, the timing is right as far as the interest rates. As of the 53,000 gallon per day capacity that's remaining and the amount that you purchased from Franklin, the sewer mains that are in the town big enough to increase that capacity, or once that 53,000 is done, you would have to lay new mains as well as purchase additional capacity. Do you know that?
I think if I remember correctly, Paul, I don't think there is capacity to actually purchase any more from Franklin.
Okay.
Is one element. But about the sewer main, I would have to defer that.
That's fine. It's the issue of capacity at the process. What do you call it?
Yeah, so if you went over that, you would have to potentially build your own plant in town. So the window for this area is definitely closing if it's bypassed at this particular time. In general, the homes that have been sewered, what is the increase in value roughly? If you add, you know what I mean? If you put the sewers in, your home is going to be worth X amount more, 10, 20 grand. Is it going to offset the cost of the connection?
I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have that data. Our valuation system, I asked our Board of Assessors to do that this week, and our valuation software can't produce that.
Yeah.
It's really something you have to hire an appraiser to go out and do on that individual property.
Okay.
Am I correct? I'm sorry. Am I correct to assume, Mr. Aspinwall, that it would be at least the amount of the betterment?
Yes.
Yeah, and it sort of has to be that at least, right?
Otherwise,
I think it would be
otherwise you
greater
can't
than
do
the
it.
bid.
Yeah, right.
It has to at least be of that amount
Yeah.
in order for us
But
to
I don't know how
Right.
much.
So, and then I guess finally, it looks like the plans that were drawn included the north and south sections, but we're only looking at west and base. How come?
So when we had the meeting a year ago, we had all four of them out there, the base, the north, the west, and the south. And based upon the feedback from that initial meeting, there was a heavy, the north was requested, south was requested, but the key part was that base to the west. And we just made the decision to offer that, and that's what we asked for the design money for.
Right.
There was a little bit more opposition in that room at the
There
time
was
to the
more-
north and the south.
Right, the opposition seemed to be, even though there was a lot of support, the opposition was coming from the north and the south.
Yeah. So would the betterment have been slightly less with additional people, or?
Yes. If
The
it was
cost
all
goes
four,
up.
it would have been less. I mean, we had all that figured out.
Yeah, so the cost goes up less than, yeah, so the more people, the better off. So would you maybe consider using up the 53,000 gallons and doing it all at once per day, and then that might lower the betterment?
It's not, I don't think that it's gonna, I don't remember what it lowers it to.
Not a
There
lot,
was
couple
opposition.
grand?
So opposition to a project like this,
Yeah,
we try to minimize that. We don't want the opposite. I mean,
yeah, no, I hear you, I understand.
Sorry, at this stage.
Yeah, we're not.
At this stage, we couldn't really do that because we'd have to go back and do a whole new design.
Yeah,
Right?
for the other
The reason
section.
why we're having this discussion now, I mean, these projects typically, there's two phases. The first phase is the design phase, which the town approved, and that was, I don't know, a year and a half ago. The second phase is the borrowing, right? And the borrowing, it would be for the 3.6 million or whatever the number was.
Yeah.
So, if we're gonna look to add the north and the south, onto those areas, we would have to do another design phase to at least incorporate those two areas. We might have to do an entire new design to do that. So, I mean, we would have to refer that back to the sewer study committee and really kind of start over.
Yeah, I
It's not
understand.
just as easy as,
Yeah.
let's just take it and run from here. We just can't do
I
that.
understand. So even though it's definitely the minority, I think it's a good idea to go forward with the project. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anything else that hasn't been, just yes?
Hi, I'm Bill Lawson. I'm at 8 Heritage Path. What has happened to the other areas that were previously requested, specifically B3?
And B3 was on here, right?
It's on the last page.
Yeah, first page, B3, Village, Main, Forest, Birch. Heritage Path doesn't have, you're all septic?
No, we're an association of 60 homes. We are already hooked into the sewer via a pumping station. The only way we would be affected, however, is if B3 was still alive, and I don't, that's why my question is there. If it is still alive, then I want to clarify exactly how it would impact us, since we're already hooked in. And we have very small properties, by the way.
Madam Chair, if the board declines to proceed with this project and decides at some point in the future to move on to a different area, we'd go through a similar solicitation of input process with those neighborhoods. And if your neighborhood were one of them, the sewer installation on that portion of Village Street would allow the abandonment of that pump station, and the costs that we could attribute as a betterment back to your properties would be the abandonment costs, because you already have the benefit of sewer. So the real value is in the elimination of the pump station.
Right. I did hear that somebody commented that there would be a 20% portion of the betterment, I believe, assessed to people who are already on the sewer. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is
Well,
correct.
how it works, the overall project, right? The overall project, how, let's say it's $1 million. Okay, the project's $1 million. The people who are going to be bettered by it will pay $800,000 of that $1 million through betterment. The remainder, the $200,000 gets spread out amongst the existing sewer users.
In the entire town, not, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that of the betterment, of the $18,000 betterment, a person in your situation would pay 20%. Is that your question? because you're so close there, you're going to actually tie in, but you're not going to get you're going to get the abandonment cost as a betterment, right?
Right, the 20% cost is spread throughout the sewer system. The theory there is that the more people you add on to the system, the lower the capital cost is from the plant in Medway. And so that's why the town adopted that, going back to the Farm Street and Flintlock Acres project years in 1995.
How can we calculate what the actual dollar amount on a yearly basis or overall basis would be to us?
We can't display it.
The dollar amount, pardon me, the dollar
amount to a Heritage Path individual who might have to pay the abandonment cost and the 20% of what everybody else in the town pays? I don't.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Chair.
The 20% that everybody else pays would be calculated out when we set rates. Every June or early July, we set sewer rates, so we wouldn't know the difference until then. If there's other debt falling off, then there might be a neutral impact. If there's next year's rate might be higher because the Charles River District is going to be increasing its assessment to us. So it's kind of hard to answer that question right now because we don't know the abandonment costs. We don't know how to allocate that back. And so it's
fair to say it's not anywhere near accurate.
Right. It wouldn't be.
It's low.
Right.
It's a low cost.
So, but basically, it's not even on the table at the moment because you did the evaluation or the study elsewhere and not in our area anyhow, so we'd be starting over again. Is that correct?
Yeah, the discussion today is about Village Street kind of west of Pleasant, or not quite west of Pleasant.
So all this would have to be redone for
Right,
us,
so-
for B3.
Right, and if we don't pursue that, which is, we're probably not going to, then I think people either on Dover Road or people in B3 or people somewhere else may say, hey, you have this capacity, this area might like to have sewer. The sewer study committee is going to take a look at it, and we would proceed from there, but yeah, you would start all over again.
Okay, and that's who we should talk to would be the sewer committee, if we wanted to do that.
I think, Madam Chair, I think if you write us a letter or whatever, or contact the town administrator's office, I think we can get going as far as, I think, I don't know, we would engage the sewer committee to look at whatever, but I think they do it, you guys would know more. I mean, I'm not involved in your committee, but is something proactive that you look at, or is it something that you wait for somebody to come with ideas?
Madam Chair, the contact we had with the neighborhood was several years ago, so perhaps it should be reinitiated. But as was just said, if you get together with your neighbors and contact, ask your neighbors to write a letter to the selectmen or an email, that would be the way to start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's not anything else, and I'm happy to hear if there is, we're going to move on in our agenda. The next item is the Clyde Brown Building Project ballot question review and approval. We discussed this last time at our last meeting, which was on a couple weeks ago now, right? January 5th. And there were some outstanding questions with respect to finalizing the ballot question and the warrant article question. So, Mr. Askelon?
Madam Chair, the language that's proposed, that has been proposed, is as follows. Shall the town of Millis be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2.5, so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bonds issued in order to perform a feasibility study, which includes obtaining soil borings, topographical studies, land surveys, wetland surveys, preliminary site development plans, schematic plans, and architectural and engineering designs, cost estimates, bid documents, and construction alternatives for the renovation or replacement of the Clyde F. Brown Elementary School located at 7 Park Road in Millis, Massachusetts, for which a feasibility study of the town may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And then there's a yes or a no line to indicate approval or not approval. So that's the question, that's the language that's been approved by town council and by bond council. And I believe the proposed date was for the 29th of February. I'm sorry, 23rd of February, I'm sorry.
All right, so can you just refresh my memory, please, with regard to, excuse me?
We need to call a special election.
Right, okay. All right, so we're going to call that for February 23rd or not. We're going to have a motion to either do or don't do. And then that would be the question as proposed. Okay. Sean, Mr. Doherty.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Madam Chair. Anything I can answer for you? Or?
I don't have any questions. I don't know if anyone else does. But this was, the school committee brought this to the MSBA for their approval.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Voicing my opinion, not specifically related to Clyde Brown, but because I know that there are field improvements coming. There's a library that was improved, talking about the police and fire. Since I've come here, I've always been puzzled about the abandoned warehouse, puzzled about the abandoned gas station at 115. And I'm also puzzled about all of the new street developments. I'm wondering if we're getting ahead of ourselves in that from a taxes standpoint. Having more residents come in is good for taxes, but possibly not better than having good quality business come in for taxes. Having more residents is good, but I don't know if the school capacities can handle everybody coming in on the Hickory Lane and that abandoned street that never really saw the light of day near the Sherborne line. So these are just my observations about the town, is that we're building extension streets, inviting more people in, which comes with more traffic. We only have so much capacity with the schools, and while it may bring in this much more in taxes to do things like library, police and fire, the field extension, like these are all good things I'd like to see, but maybe after we have businesses come in, reliable businesses that have more tax power than bringing people in that are going to bring more cars in. Does this kind of make sense with what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that's constantly the issue that we're always facing. Yes, you have development, people move in, they use our services, whether it's our police, our fire, our ambulance, our DPW, our roads they're certainly using, our schools, our fields, and the sewer too. You know, we have all those issues. But these are private property owners who are doing things. The schools haven't been updated in years. Library was in the 60s. The police station. I mean, you know, we have all these things. So there's a lot of deferred. There's a lot of deferred maintenance over some of these things. That's one issue. And then, you know, we do have influx, which is good, but it also means that we have to keep up with things. So, Mr. Ashmore?
Just, Madam Chair, there is good news in that regard. The planning board recently approved a special permit for use of a portion of the Ann and Hope property for a hydroponic farming business, which is estimated to bring 15 to 20 jobs to the town. The gas station is going to be, I don't know if it happened, but the Needham Bank has received a permit to put a new bank on that corner, and that building is soon to be demolished, and construction will start in the spring on the new bank. There are 3 new businesses coming in to the JOPA properties, so we do have some good news in that regard.
Okay, so that's just what I'm saying, is let's just keep...
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry, you know, all these other properties, you know, they may be abandoned warehouses and not, but they pay taxes on those by square footage. So those still generate tax revenue. We want to maximize those properties. We've taken a lot of steps over the last year to do that by changing the zoning, you know, to really try to get those properties to produce, to maximize the revenues back to the town, because they're critical, they're critical buildings in town, and we understand that. But it is private property. We can't force somebody to develop those. And they do generate revenues right now. It's not just because they're not being used that the revenue doesn't come to the town.
So there's revenue based on the square footage tax. It's a private issue, so you can't go in there and muscle or help bring in business that will have operating revenue that you can tax at you know what I'm saying?
Well, no, but that's not the way the taxes work, though. Right? The only surchargeable tax we have in the town is we're allowed to collect from from the state is on meals. So like a restaurant coming in, there's an additional surcharge on that the town has accepted. But we have one tax rate in this town, the same tax rate for commercial, residential, industrial, and did I say residential? We all pay the same tax rate. Right now it's $17 per thousand. Okay, so it's one of those things that we want to maximize the revenues brought in from those properties, but it's not like if a retailer comes in, if they're going to pay anything more than what their property is assessed at that $17 per thousand rate.
So then, I guess I could sympathize that this little community of Millis, you on the board of selectmen, have a tough job of trying to deal with only so many knobs and pulleys to make the town operate. I mean, as I said, my taxes have gone up and up and up since I've got here, and we do want to have better facilities, but there's really only so much that you can do.
Right, our taxes have gone up too, right? We live in town, and I would ask you, it's the same everywhere, all right? Taxes are going up everywhere. Larger communities do better because they have a bigger pool. A lot of communities that say have a huge commercial, retail, industrial base, they can split their tax rate and put a larger portion on commercial and industrial and a smaller portion on residential. So it'd be surprising that there's a lot of towns that don't do that even with that. So, it's one of those things that we're challenged with in this town, but we also want to make sure that the things we put the town meeting around zoning changes and whatnot is going to have a good effect on that area to attract business, because it's always good to attract business, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do down there.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks for having this sort of impromptu meeting and sending out the letters to the people impacted. Otherwise, I would have missed it. But and then just a completely random note: the new athletic fields. Did you ever include plans or the idea of a skate park footprint in the athletic fields?
Oh, you mean like
Skateboard park, just all concrete.
I was hoping you were talking about hockey because I played when I came in today. No, it wasn't part of it.
Okay. I don't know whether it's too late or not, but I mean, you could get
Well,
something.
that's also sort of, that was also no voted, so
Okay.
it's not, that doesn't mean it's something that I guess we're considering all different options, so certainly
Okay.
could be considered.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair,
Mr. Smith?
I move that the Board of Selectmen do call a special election for the what was the date? It was
February 23rd, 2015.
February 23rd, 2015, for the purpose of determining the funding for the feasibility study for the Clyde F. Brown project. Is it a separate motion for the ballot question, Mr. Asimov, or should we?
You could say including the proposed ballot question.
Including the proposed ballot question. Do I have to read this because it's...
I'll read it.
Thank you, if you can read it. So that's my motion. I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the Board of Selectmen do call a special town meeting for February 23rd, 2015 to, and that town election include the following ballot question. Shall the town of Millis be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2.5, so-called, the amounts required to pay for the bonds issued in order to perform a feasibility study, which includes obtaining soil borings, topographical studies, land surveys, wetland surveys, preliminary site development plans, schematic designs, architectural and engineering designs, cost estimates, bid documents, and construction alternatives for the renovation or replacement of the Clyde F. Brown Elementary School located at 7 Park Road in Millis, Massachusetts, for which feasibility study the town may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And that will be a question, a ballot question, with options for either yes or no. All those in favor? Aye. Mr. Smith, or I'm sorry, Mr. Aspinwall, the next item is the warrant article. So in the event that...
Thank you.
In the event that, well, we would, no matter what, we would set a special town meeting right now. This would be the
I
sole...
thought you were going to do that at your next meeting.
Do you do it at the next meeting?
Yeah, the way it was posted on the agenda was just a ballot question.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
So that's Monday night.
The 26th.
The 26th.
Right. All right.
Okay. Okay, so,
We don't have any timing issues still, right? We're not bumped up against anything. And it's still our intention to do that, so. Madam Chair?
Mr. Smith?
You know, if I could just say, you know, I really, I think at this point, you know, there's been a lot of talk around town, around the process around a special election and a special town meeting. You know, we spent a lot of time going back to, I guess at this point, it was June when this started, to really try to fit this into the town schedule. And it just wasn't possible. If we were to try to tackle this in November, it takes a 9-month process in total and shrinks that down to 4 months without any type of notification of residents or any type of outreach that the school committee could do. So it really shortens it by even more than that. And that would be, I think we would have been on the hot seat for kind of rushing that through at that point. So we knew this was going to be an expense for a special town election and a special town meeting. Shortly after that process, when the MSBA told us that we couldn't extend it to our regularly scheduled May election and May town meeting. And I believe the estimate, I know it's under $10,000 what was told to me, but typically around $6,000 to $7,000 is what these are going to cost the town to do, all right, you know, in total. So around the integrity of the process and everything, I know when I'm here talking about special town meetings and whatnot, I'm looking for a couple things to kind of make up my mind whether to put something on a ballot. One's the reasonableness of the request, and the other is the readiness of the group that's doing it. So I believe from the school committee's presentation to all the work they've done into this, that the feasibility study, the funds being solicited for of $1 million with a 51% reimbursement rate from the state seems like a reasonable request to me, and the need for that matches. In addition, the readiness, I think, was displayed through their, not only their presentation, but also how they outlined several sessions of community outreach, which everybody's going to be have the opportunity to go. So if you want to talk about the merits of this, see, I'm not factoring the merits into this. If you want to talk about the merits of this, you know, to make up your mind on which way to vote for this feasibility study, I encourage everybody to go to school committee meetings, go to the information sessions, and really learn what this is all about. And I think Mr. Doherty and the rest of the school committee here would agree with that as well. Because I know I will be going to those sessions so that I can make up my mind as an educated voter as well.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I just want to add there are currently 3 informational sessions scheduled, one for January 22nd at 7 p.m., one for January 27th at 10 a.m., one for February 12th at 7 p.m., all in the Roach Brothers Community Room at the Millis Public Library. And just to be clear as to the process, we formally didn't decide to go forward on the project until December, so a month ago. So we wouldn't have been ready. We weren't ready for the November election. Obviously, the 270 days has constrained us that we can't go forward in May, that it's a March 15th or 16th end date. So the process is dictated by the by the state, not by us. It is, as you said, a 51% reimbursement rate. These are repairs or renovations that are needed, at least in the amount of $3.9 million. So this is something that needs to be done. And if it needs to be done, we thought this would be the opportunity to obviously get 51 cents back on the dollar for the taxpayer. So it's a rare opportunity. I hope people educate themselves about it and come out and hear the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So are we moving on to the minutes?
Yes, we are, but so at our next Selectmen's meeting, which is going to be on the 26th of January, we will review the warrant article question, which will be scheduled for, the date is March 3rd, is that right?
March 9th.
March 9th, okay.
March 9th. 23rd and the 9th.
So we too will be talking about it again.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Smith,
I move that the Board of Selectmen do approve and accept the meeting minutes, the regular session meeting minutes of Monday, December 15th, 2014 as written.
Second.
is that just the regular session?
I was going to do a separate.
Yeah, that's fine. It's been moved and seconded to approve the regular session meeting minutes of December 15th, 2014. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Selectmen do approve and accept the executive session meeting minutes from December 1st, 2014 as written.
Wait a minute.
Second.
I don't have that one.
I think you might. It was just 12:15.
Oh, you said it was December 1st.
Yeah, well, this is December 1st. I also have December 5th here, too. Was the executive session on, was it on the January 5th?
Executive session.
Madam Chair, I'll rescind that for now until we get that straightened out. All right, I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen do approve and accept the regular session meeting minutes from Monday, January 5th, 2015, as written.
Second, yes,
January 5th.
January 5th.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the regular session meeting minutes of January 5th, 2015. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I believe this is a
All right,
typo.
why don't we do
I think
this?
the executive session is supposed to be for the 15th.
It is, but you're going to,
The date.
okay, you're going to modify it, so it's going to be,
Got it.
it's going to be, all right.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Smith,
I move that the Board of Selectmen do approve and accept pending the change of the date to December 15th, the executive session meeting minutes included for that date.
Second as amended.
it's been moved and seconded to approve the executive session Board of Selectmen meeting minutes for December 15th, 2014, with the amendment that the date be changed to December 15th, 2014. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, as I mentioned, our next Board of Selectmen's meeting will be Monday, January 26, 2015. That will be at 7:30 in room 229 of the Board of Selectmen Town Hall. Do you want to say something?
Just, do we have February's meeting scheduled?
I believe you do.
Yeah,
It's the 9th and the 23rd.
Okay.
it's in the meeting minutes.
I remember that because it was the same for March, the 9th and the 23rd for both months.
Every 3 year, every year,
Isn't that weird?
except for the 4th, it's always in February and March.
And
Is it really?
Mhm.
February is a perfect square.
Right, it's 28 days.
Oh, okay. Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
Mr. Neville,
I'll second that.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night.